For more now, we are joined by historian Thomas Balcerski from Eastern Connecticut State University. Thank you so much, Thomas, for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Chris.
Okay, so in so many ways, Trump has had an unprecedented presidency, and true to form, he is having a very unprecedented exit from the White House as well. Put all of this into context for me. What is making this one stand out?
Well, since the passage of the Presidential Transition Act in 1963, there's been legislation in effect to help smooth the transition from outgoing president to incoming president. And although we have seen some rough transitions here in American history, this one does stand out as unprecedented. Never before, after an election has been called, after the result has been generally accepted and made known, after a president-elect has been declared, has an outgoing president, has an incumbent outgoing president, so resisted the outcome of the people's will, of the democratic process. So it's a combination of President Trump's refusal to accept, refusal to concede, and refusal to then begin the transition to President-elect Joe Biden.
What are the tangible problems that happen when all of those things that you just outlined? What's the problem when all of those come together?
Part of the problem is that the Presidential Transition Act actually is a good thing. It allows for equipment and office space to be given to the new administration. It allows for funds as administered by the General Services Administration, the GSA, to be passed on to the incoming administration. And also allows for the incoming president to receive national security briefings. Now, in the history of presidential transition, it's been this last part that's proven critical. In fact, after 2001, after the slow transition to President George W. Bush, and after the tragic events of 9/11, we saw the 9/11 Commission report that that slow transition actually hampered the Bush administration's ability to put into place key officials in the cabinet and on the national security team, such that when the terrorist attacks happened, the United States was less prepared than it could have been. So national security absolutely needs to be one of our concerns as we make a transition from President Trump to President-elect Biden.
I'm glad you brought up 2000 because a lot of people have talked about that election as they're looking at and digesting this one. But I know that you would say that this is completely a different scenario. So walk us through what are the differences between what we saw in 2000 and what we're dealing with now.
Well, certainly in our living memory, the election of 2000 comes the closest to what we're going through now. In the election of 2000, there too, the GSA administrator refused to ascertain or provide ascertainment, to use a technical term, to the incoming administration. And part of that had to do with the lack of concession from Vice President Al Gore, who was closely contesting the race in Florida. Now, in 2000, the Electoral College vote was so close that it came down to just one state, Florida. And in the recount that took place by mandatory law under Florida statute, the end result ended up being less than 550 votes. In fact, 537 votes separated Governor Bush and Vice President Gore. And that one state of Florida, gave Governor Bush then enough votes to become the electoral winner and move on to become the next president. Here, we see something entirely different. We see a series of states clearly in the Biden column. In the case of Michigan, more than 150,000 votes separates Vice President Biden from President Trump. And in the other states, in Nevada and Arizona and Georgia and Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, the margins are even greater. And so what we're seeing is a contestation across 6 different states, lawsuits left and right also being thrown out. One big difference from 2000, these frivolous lawsuits that are going nowhere. And I have to say, President Trump is running out of options very quickly here.
And so as we're looking at what's happening right now, a lot of what the focus is around certifying the results at present at various states. But even Republican officials doing this work in states like Georgia and Pennsylvania, some of them we know are getting death threats and fielding still these baseless accusations that just continue to come in from Trump supporters. So what does all of this say about how dangerous this situation is?
To think during a pandemic, as critical workers, particularly people working in the polling places, count those ballots, put themselves at risk in this COVID-19 pandemic, to think then that our public officials are receiving threats against their life and limb is it's really difficult to hear this and to know that this is the case in America in 2020. It also, though, gets to the nature of our government here. We have a federal system whereby the 50 states and the District of Columbia each have their own method of first counting the ballots and then certifying those ballots. The certification process, which is key because it provides an official stamp on each state, result is what's happening now. And because of the nature of 50 states and the District of Columbia having 51 different ways of certifying ballots, we are in the middle of a weeks-long certification process. It won't be until December the 14th when the Electoral College meets across the United States and casts its ballots that then we will have the official vote. And it seems to me the strategy coming from the Republican Party now is to call into question this very process of certification, something that previously had been depoliticized, had been part of the democratic process, and frankly, something we celebrated as showing we could transition from one administration to the next.
And the other thing that talks about a big celebration of that transition is, of course, Inauguration Day. We still don't know if outgoing President Trump is going to actually go to that inauguration. That has happened in the past some 3 times, but you've got to go way back in history to find that. Can you brief us on those examples and what happened there?
No, you're right, Chris. In modern times, it would be unprecedented for the outgoing President Donald Trump not to attend the inauguration of his successor. In fact, there's a whole pageantry and ritual to this moment where we see the two presidents, outgoing and incoming, riding together from the White House to the Capitol. We see them, one standing, taking the oath of office as the other watches on. And then finally, the farewell wave as the outgoing president boards Marine One for the last time for that flight home. All that will be lost. All that will not take place. And what it does have to remind us is that in history, when that has happened, way back, you're right, it actually wasn't so bad a thing for the country. In deeply divided partisan times, when an outgoing president refused, when he snubbed the inauguration of his successor, well, that incoming president had quite a successful administration, 2 terms, in fact, and indeed, eras and ages are named for those presidents. So I would say, if for those who study history, for those who want to try to find a comparison, don't fret so much about that part of it. It may not end badly after all.
All right. Well, fascinating times. Thank you so much for walking us through all this, Thomas.
Oh, happy to be here, Chris.
And Thomas Balcerski is with Eastern Connecticut State University.